talk about my son. I don't know. Oh. Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland. Gage, Will, and Mike Hattery joining me today. Before we get started with the podcast, we just want to send a shout out to everyone to say thank you for a great early reception for the return of everyonehatescleveland.com. If you didn't know we were back, we are posting almost every single day, just the three of us. So a lot of output coming from the other two guys. I've posted twice. They've carried the load, and it has been a really successful early run for EHC. So we're glad to be back and glad that those of you that have followed us over the years are still following us. Please, please, please pass the word along. If you read an article that you like, if you're a podcast that you like, send them our way. Share out the link, everyonehatescleveland.com, and check out all the content. We're having a lot of fun with this, and we're planning on doing this for the long haul. So make sure you check out Mike's work. Mike and I have been writing together for 5, 6, 7 years now. Gage, who started off at the same place we did at IBI, we've been writing together now for 2 or 3 years. So EHC is back, and we're glad to be doing it. With that said, Gage, how is it that with a fairly newborn, you found time to actually do this?
Oh, I just buck all my responsibilities as a father.
All right, we'll block that.
Paternity leave is a gift. Let's just say that.
Yeah, my fantastic corporate company allows me 4 weeks of paternity leave. So thank you guys.
Well, we're glad. Do you know how many podcasts we did during that 4 weeks of? We did none. Mike, it's good to have you back. You've been tweeting and posting like a madman. Like what's going on?
I don't know, man.
You're the backbone of the site.
I just looked today, and it's like 13 pieces since the last week of February, which, man, I'm going to really crash soon.
Right about time for me to start my summer break. So life will be good. All right. We are going to continue our positional previews. Before we get into second base and Jason Kipnis and the variety of people are going to be supporting him this year in injury and whatever. I do want to do a little topical conversation. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Paul Dolan this year and talking about payroll and just a lot of foot and mouth disease. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? I mean, I think that everybody's kind of kicked that horse pretty hard. I mean, what are your thoughts on it, Gage? You've been fairly quiet on the EHC airwaves of late. Let's give you the open forum to start. You know, of course, I think that the Indians ownership is getting us, I guess, ready to get rid of all of our good players down the road because we can't afford them. What are your thoughts?
I mean, that horse is dead, by the way. I will say that it's hilarious to watch billionaires, or I mean, maybe Paul Dolan isn't a billionaire, but several hundred millionaire, whatever you want to call them. It's hilarious to watch those types of guys just run rampant. We see it with Dan Gilbert and Jimmy Haslam. It's like they've never had anybody counsel them on the PR side. And it's a different way for each one of those guys. Dolan in a much quieter, woe is me type way. But I just can't ever get on board with that tone from these guys. That was my biggest issue.
It is an interesting honestly, Dolan has been fairly quiet over the tenure of his ownership. You'll get him talking once or twice a year, and usually it's fairly calm and cool and collected. Something's clearly changed. Maybe the water that he's drinking is something in it. I don't know. Mike, what are your thoughts? We've been for ever since I've known you, we've been supporters of this front office, of this ownership. They've kind of gotten a bum rap over the years, but it's hard to throw support when they've been taking these hits for 20 years, and then they kind of fall into the hits. I mean, is this just 20 years of them having to put up with they're not Dick Jacobs? And finally, like the straw has broke the camel's back, so to speak.
Yeah, I just am so thoroughly. I mean, stop texting me. No, I'm just kidding. I have no remaining thoughts on this. I think I've run across Paul Dolan a couple of times in a couple of different like charitable settings, and he's like running the fundraising campaign for the United Way in Cleveland this year. He's like a fundamentally very good man who I have nothing but positive things to say about. Except, yeah, I mean, just don't talk. I mean, I think the reality is a couple of hardcore fans or like a small smattering were really frustrated about this offseason. But in general, it's, that's a really small group. And if you just go back and win the Central again, nobody really gives a damn. But if you go out and publicly whine about the fact that you're losing money, even though, and you talk about the fact that you make money when you have bad teams, I don't think that's a particularly bright thing to broadcast. So I would just say I find that a little disappointing. I don't really want to talk about public finance. Let's talk about a crappy second baseman now.
Oh, don't come in too hot over there. Shit.
All right. Let's talk about second base. And the 25-man roster is set. Jason Kipnis is starting the season off on the DL. I mean, Gage, you kind of have to start this off. I mean, you wrote the piece a couple of weeks ago talking about, obviously Kipnis has been somewhat overrated over the past couple of seasons based on performance and some failed experiments, especially with swing playing and whatnot. But you talked a little bit about last season and about how if you take out, and again, this is being selective, but if you take out a month and a half of a season, he did have a fairly strong end of the season. It's certainly better than the overall numbers showcased. This is Kipnis's last season. I guess the first question is, with a guy that has played the style of baseball that Jason Kipnis has over the years and dealt with a variety of those kind of wear down issues, how worried are you about him starting the year off on the DL, one, and two, talk a little bit about the perhaps undervalue that Jason Kipnis presents, and a lot of discussion about usage as well. Again, it seems like every time we talk about a position, we talk about how Tito Francona utilizes said position. Maybe talk a little bit about that as well. And give you your general thoughts on Kipnis heading into the year, injury front, and what potential uptick he can give the team.
First off, I'm mortified about this injury, to be honest. Just red flag for a guy on the wrong side of 30 who's, as you said, plays pretty wall-to-wall hard. And
Gage, hold up a sec.
Yeah.
Something sounds off. Like, Mike, can you hear him? I can't hear him.
I can hear him.
Can you hear him clear? Hello?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
He's good for me.
Hello? I can hear you now. Mike? Oh, yes. God.
I'm right here. Jim.
All right.
I'll swing back in.
All right. So the question was, general thoughts on Kipnis' injury, and then what kind of uptick can he give the Indians?
Yeah, first off, I'm mortified about the guy on the wrong side of 30 running into some health problems to start this season, especially a second baseman who plays as hard as he does. Mostly, my position on Kipnis isn't that he's great, but I just strongly oppose. It's like in this instant gratification society, there's only DFA him or he's a 5-WAR all-star. Like there's no middle ground. And I think this Indians roster might severely lack fundamentally average players. And this isn't a ringing endorsement by any means. I just think he can be fundamentally average. And especially if, as you kind of alluded to, Jim, especially if Tito kind of isolates his plate appearances against right-handed pitchers. Can I get Yu Chang? Anybody? Or you just got to kind of work with him, maybe take some of that load off of him from playing day-to-day and isolate his appearances to righties. And I think he can give you 1.5 to 2 WAR in 110, 120 games. Not a ringing endorsement by any stretch, but I still think he can be a serviceable player on a team that lacks a lot of depth.
Okay, I'm just gonna be square with you. This might be me, but I can hear you, but it's sounding horrid. Like it's like
Sounds pretty good on my end, to be honest.
All right. Should I try to leave and come back? It might be me. The problem is I think if I leave, it'll shut down.
Yeah,
but I don't.
That's what.
You want me to leave and come back real quick?
No, I don't. Now I can hear you just fine. I don't know. Maybe the sound will come in okay. I'm not really sure. But what's happening is, you know, that robot sound you get every once in a while?
Yeah.
So I get it for like a second, then you disappear, and then I'm hearing everything all at once, which actually sounds pretty funny. I don't know. Would you mind trying to run through that one more time? And
yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Okay. If not, then maybe it's just I have to get out and come back in and we just start over and just go from there. But try one more time. Let's see what happens.
So I'm mortified of the Jason Kipnis injury, mostly because he's a second baseman on the wrong side of 30. And he's, like, as you mentioned, he's played a very specific, hard kind of baseball over the course of his career. So any kind of bang up calf or hamstring, those kind of muscles scare me. And as far as using him, it's not going to be a ringing endorsement by any means, but it's in this instant gratification society, we ask that guys are either 4 to 5 WAR all-stars or DFA them. He's in the middle. He's the middle ground that the Indians lack. They lack significant depth, and especially if Tito can use him effectively by isolating his plate appearances, the righties, and sitting him on the bench a little bit more against lefties, I think he can be a pretty productive 1.5 to 2 WAR player over 120 games or so. Would be the perfect bridge for Yu Chang, but he's going to wallow in Columbus for a little while.
Well, we'll definitely get into Yu Chang talk. I think that'll be probably the most fun of this podcast. But Mike, I think probably you're on the other end of the Jason Kipnis discussion. I'm not really sure. I am actually a little bit sure, but you know, sometimes you surprise me on these podcasts. So if utilized correctly, is there life left in Jason Kipnis here in the last year of his contract?
Yeah, I mean, there's life there. I think what we've seen though is like what I was really concerned about, which is like Kipnis is a guy who like has had these really good peak seasons, and he's also had really bad or close to league average seasons when he's hurt. And we have another soft tissue injury, and those, you know, like Gage pointed out, I mean, this was my case against him, or anxiety. It's just like those things add up, and you don't seem to escape them the older you get. The other thing is, I guess my larger skepticism is his overall sort of like average profile was kind of anchored in defense last year to a certain extent. And another year, another soft tissue injury. I guess I'm just not as optimistic that he holds it, but I hope he does. It's really important for the Indians because 95 WRC plus and average defense at second, crossing that off the list would be really nice. I'm just my like range of certainty is a little lower, but I would like to dunk and note something, which is this is why I do not want Jose Ramirez ever playing second base again. Because Jason Kipnis is why. I want Jose Ramirez to have a long and productive career, and Jason Kipnis has destroyed his body at second base, and I have no interest in that for Jose Ramirez. Everybody's like, oh, let's put Yu Chang at third and move Jose to second. No, you can throw the riffraff at second base. Throw the 2 WAR players at second base. Keep Jose safe.
He's just egging you on, Gage. That's all there is to it. All right, so I guess, you know, is there any validity? I mean, they bring in Brad Miller, a decent signing, especially considering the fact we're late here in spring training and heading to opening day at the beginning of next week. You know, I guess long term though, you know, you were talking earlier, Gage, about platooning Kipnis potentially with Yu Chang. I mean, Miller's not the obvious platoon candidate because he hits left-handed as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on Brad Miller supplementing Jason Kipnis? We'll come full circle and talk Kipnis again, but because I do want to talk lineup. But talk to me a little bit about Brad Miller. It seems like, Mike, you liked him as well. What kind of pickup was that for the Indians this late in the spring training?
It's a pretty fun one. Wait, did I just interrupt Gage?
Well, technically, I've been letting Gage lead like I felt bad for him. I felt sorry for him. He hasn't been around. He's got a little baby. He's got other little kids running around. I just thought I'd let him lead a little bit. But, Mike, this is at the end of the day, we are the old guard here. So you're the OG, man. Step in whenever you want.
Gage should talk.
No, the floor is yours, Hat Man.
No. I mean, I do. Miller's fascinating to me. I mean, he's been like literally replacement level for 2 years, but like his bat is somewhat interesting. He has some notion of power. He has this K percentage spike, which is tough to explain. And maybe that changes, and that'd be great. So that's why I'm sort of into Brad Miller. And I think comparatively, like, I'm not a huge Max Morph is quasi interesting. Staymats we can talk about. But like Miller is like a really interesting middle infield bench piece if Kipnis gets healthy and produces and Lindor is healthy. Like Miller would be one of the better bench pieces we've run out there in a while, in my view. I don't know.
The only thing I would say about the Miller, I like guys that can give you something offensively. I don't like wasting time with these little patchwork defensive value types spinning their wheels at second base as placeholders. Miller is a guy who's shown that he has the ability to hit it over the fence. Maybe not for a couple years, but at least there's a ceiling there on offense. That's my favorite part of the deal. I haven't gotten into the nitty-gritty of his Fangraphs page or Baseball Reference page yet, but I like having a framework or a path that you could see where he's semi-productive for 45 games.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a typical Indians late, 35-year-old stopgap, can't play kind of guy. I mean, obviously, 3, 4, 5 years ago, he was putting up big numbers, and it'll be curious to see, if Kipnis is hurt for an extended period of time. It'll be curious to see what he can do over the long haul. Now, I do want to talk Yu Chang here simply because it seemed like he was a no-brainer going into, again, a season where the Indians were perhaps favored to win the division, although we've seen some fairly interesting tweets and pieces over the past couple of days about that. But back to Yu Chang. What kind of message, Mike, does this send to those folks supporting like Yu Chang? Like you've been following him for a few years. He does bring some interest, an interesting skill set. He's not super young, so this did seem like the perfect opportunity to give him a chance, especially with Kipnis out. They bring in Brad Miller and they sign him to a major league deal. Obviously, Miller's going to be here for the full season. I mean, is this the sign of, Yu Chang is like done?
So, you were talking to Mike. I never mind. Let me get off the floor.
I think we'll get one of these transitions right eventually.
That was intentional.
Gage is doing that on purpose. He's just.
Oops.
I tell you, no good.
You're talking about Yu Chang still? Let's go.
Yeah,
Yu Chang's fascinating. He's got power. He plays middle infield positions. Someone recently gerrymandered his stats to say that he actually hit right-handed pitching better in the minors because he only used upper minor stats. That was quaint. But really, I mean, I think Chang's a good platoon partner. He's super athletic. I think he can play second and third if he needs to. You know what? I mean, I think some more Columbus PAs could be potentially good for him, but I think in reality he has to learn at the big league level, and that's how some of this has to go. And maybe it's the cost of competing for World Series that like the Indians don't want to do this, and they're like, we'll buy, we'll buy more Miller PAs. Miller makes sense to me if we want to talk more often. Staymats, I think both those guys have fascinating characteristics, but I don't really buy the argument that their floors are any higher than Chang's. I don't really buy the argument that you can't get Chang like 3 to 4 days worth of plate appearances a week just based on roster construction. So, Gage.
Again, Chang is a guy with an offensive ceiling and a blueprint you can work out that And I mean, maybe it is a service time thing. It just seems kind of weird right now for the Indians. I guess you always have to be conscious of it, but right now is when you need that production more so than maybe 2024. Even though the young minors are stacked, Chang is fascinating because he can hit for power. He can find gaps. Mike is the resident expert on him, but I'm a fan of Chang as a platoon partner, especially this year, like he said.
All right, so I guess, as we start to wrap this thing up, the Indians do have some interesting pieces, but coming back full circle to Kipnis, where does Kipnis hit in this lineup this year? I mean, obviously the beginning of his career through the middle of his career, really through much of the beginning of last year, this was an upper order guy with Lindor out. I mean, I don't know where they're going to end up hitting him, but I suspect he's probably going to be knocking on the door somewhere that's going to annoy us. But over the long haul, like, where do you see Kipnis hitting in the lineup? And do you actually think that he's going to be utilized in a fashion that can enhance the fact that he's a left-handed hitter, or are we probably going to see Kipnis utilized in a poor way?
You know the answer to that, don't you?
Well, I have to ask the question because I do, but I have to ask the question because I think that when you look at a guy like Jason Kipnis, he's entered a phase of his career, and some would argue he's been in this phase for the past 2 years, but he's entered a phase of his career where clearly, age is playing a factor, and he's become clearly a platoon bat, and while he's making a ton of money, I mean, I think we're going to have to keep asking this question over the span of the year, just to maybe showcase the fact that it's not just us being curmudgeons, that Francona utilizes almost every single position in very interesting and sometimes frustrating ways when they have a player like Yu Chang who could be kind of that compatriot for Kipnis. I just don't see it happening. And I just want to throw that out there. I mean, is there a chance, and maybe I do start with you, Mike, as the Yu Chang guy. I mean, is there a chance that Tito Francona sees Yu Chang at some point this year and goes, he can play now and not get a mysterious 600 at bats somewhere at the big league level that's like in some sort of neutral, like, I don't know, some other plateau that we don't know about? I mean, is Yu Chang ever going to get a chance to be that platoon guy, or are we just going to end up with Yu Chang next year, perhaps even in a role of a starter when he should be platooning?
Yeah, I think all those things are likely.
And I'm not saying you don't give Yu Chang a chance to start someday. I'm just saying as Gage has kind of been on this boat, you've kind of been on this boat from the start. I mean, they fit really well together. And wouldn't it make sense with 1 year left and your veteran guy to give Yu Chang that support, and perhaps his first year playing Major League Baseball as opposed to perhaps just, there you go.
Yeah, and I think too, let's talk about I just completely gerrymandering Jim questions, which is to say, hey, service time isn't really an issue here, guys. He's a 23-and-a-half-year-old. They're not trying to buy his age 30 season. They don't care about manipulating that cost right now. They're trying to win a World Series. Nothing to do with it. Okay, we're done. Moving on. I think they view him much the way they viewed Naquin when they called Naquin, started the season with Naquin, in that he's interesting and could be a potential starter, but he's probably more an important role player is his best fit, who plays 130 games a year, and that player is important. But this isn't a service time manipulation thing. I think they think he has things to work on, which is potentially true. I think you're right. I think Chang probably enters next year as with a strong advantage to start at second base. Although my boy Ernie Clement, who I have a strange love and affection for, will also be getting an opportunity. So I do think it's interesting. You have these collapsed timelines where Chang, by the time Chang gets the opportunity to seize the role, somebody else is going to be fighting him for it. And maybe someone with better prospect pedigree. So I do think there's an extent to which it's this is one of those closed window things where we saw it with Diaz, we saw it with Jesus Aguilar. sometimes players, the window of opportunity closes for them pretty quickly in terms of securing a role. And I think that could be true for Chang.
We're going to see on Memorial Day against Chris Sale, it's going to be Kipnis and Naquin in the lineup card. That's how much faith I have.
Oh God.
Yeah, I mean it's important to note. I mean, I think that, again, Terry Francona has been a manager for a super long time, and I'm not. So I know that this comes off as, but I just you talk about open windows and you talk about the depth of a team, and while we have some interesting depth in the middle infield, and we'll talk about short and third on our next podcast. I mean, I would love to, in the middle of all that depth, actually give Yu Chang a chance to perhaps soften his way into the lineup, as opposed to maybe throwing him in there in September or August, where he's, that's not really the trial by fire you want for a guy who's, probably needs some things to work on. I will say this. If I had faith in utilization, I would say Yu Chang next year as a flex player, playing multiple positions would be tremendous. Just never is going to happen. All right, floor is yours, you guys. Anything else you'd like to say about middle infield, second base? I'm not sure, Gage, you got enough time to talk about Jason Kipnis. The floor is yours, unless Mike wants to interrupt him for fun.
So I do want to use this time to dunk on Eric Gonzalez.
Man, I'm sorry. I totally forgot. We should have let off with that. Go ahead.
So I have nothing against Eric Gonzalez. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice human being. But this segment of the Indians fan base that he has hypnotized is just plain weird to me. He's a guy who is a good defender, fine, but there is no hit tool there. There's no projectable hit tool. Like, his ceiling is your 85 WRC plus. Am I wrong? Anybody have an issue with that?
No.
Somewhere in the archives of one of the EHC test sites is a piece in which I called Eric Gonzalez the next Michael Martinez. So I think I can leave my thoughts there.
The Indians are better off, even with their depth issues, that he is not at Tito's disposal. That's my mini rant on Eric Gonzalez.
I honest to God, that's where it's got to end. We end on Eric, on Egon. And by the way, he gone, so we don't have to worry about him anymore. All right. This officially puts us past last year's positional previews. We are actually going to combine the shortstop and third base together. Jose Ramirez and Francisco Lindor. That's not going to take a long time to talk, but we do have some fun upside conversation there. So that'll be coming up after this one. So pay attention to our feed. Our iTunes feed and our Spotify feed are going through some wonky times right now. We're working on that. Please stick with the podcast. Make sure you give us a listen. And if you subscribe to us and something happened and you're not subscribed to us anymore, please go back and subscribe. I'm talking with iTunes, trying to get everything squared away. New site, you're going to have, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I do want to make sure to plug, Mike's got a piece coming out tomorrow. I have a piece coming out tomorrow. 2 podcasts are coming out tomorrow. Probably one tonight, one tomorrow. We'll have podcasts coming out a lot this week because we got to finish our positional previews heading into opening day. My column's coming back. I got a State of the Union piece coming out. We're just putting pieces out like crazy. So please, please, please check out everyonehatescleveland.com. We're going to keep putting out as much original content, and I think that our content holds up with anybody else's content out there. There's a reason why WFNY got us, and we wish them all the luck, of course, but again, we're on our home turf once again. So please, 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 everyonehatescleveland.com and subscribe to this podcast. And ignore what Hattery said in the last podcast, 5-star reviews. That's all we've gotten so far. That's all we want. If you want to give us a 4-star review, we want a 5-star review. Oh, and I didn't say any of the names of the people who gave us reviews so far because as of right now, they weren't showing up. So as soon as they show up, I will make sure to give you guys your proper shout outs. Oh, and I did get set up with Patreon. So be paying attention, guys. Sometime in the next month or two, we should have Patreon up. I don't know what it's going to do yet, but something. All right. Second base is done. On to the rest. Peace. Go try.